Warning, the Surgeon General has determined that the sounds you're about to hear can be devastating to your ear.
You're now listening to the legendary Vinyl Esquire. Vinyl Esquire.
Right, man, you're on your way. Peace.
The track. You got the right one, baby. Yo, Doodle, man, what you got for me now? Doodle in effect. Here we go, let's take it to the bridge.
You're now listening to the legendary Vinyl Esquire.
Hold up.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know who this is. This is the infamous.
You got the right one, baby. Yo, Doodle, man, what you got for me now?
Bitch, that ain't fair. Give that horsey back. It's that. Oh, bitch, that ain't fair. Give that horsey back. It's that.
Vinyl Esquire.
Here we go, let's take it to the bridge.
There's some hoes in this house. 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 There's some hoes.
Yo, Doodle, man, what you got for me now? Doodle in effect. Yo, Doodle. Hold up.
Hello world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, the podcast that delivers culture, truth, music. Would you join me, please, in welcoming DJ Rip?
Hello world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, and my name is DJ Rip, and Vinyl Esquire is the DJ podcast that uplifts the DJ culture and honors our legends. And without further ado, I would like to welcome to Vinyl Esquire, the legendary DJ, the legendary producer, the radio icon, the legendary Mr. Doodoo Brown himself. I would like to welcome to Vinyl Esquire, the legendary Frank Ski.
Hey, that's nice. I like that intro. I got to save that. I might have to put that intro on my next record.
Hey, you could do whatever you want to do with it when I send you a copy.
Right.
Frank, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, bro. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for allowing me to interview you, allowing me to share with the listeners, your vast history. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's start at the beginning. Frank Ski, why don't you tell me who or what made you want to be a DJ?
It was very interesting. When I was younger, I used to grow up in South Florida with my father, but my mother lived in Harlem, New York with the rest of my family. And every holiday, Christmas, Easter, every summer, I was back up in Harlem, New York City. And that culture of hip hop, starting with the mixtape era, really had me honestly wanting to be, I thought I could be a rapper. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I started actually rapping. But when I would go home to Miami, back to go to school and whatnot, as a young teenager, nobody was doing hip hop or rap in Miami. And it really wasn't until obviously those early Sugar Hill records started coming out in Miami in the early 80s that people started knowing anything about rap music. And I would remember going to skating rings and, as a teenager and getting on the mic with the DJ and actually rapping the record, like copying what the record was saying. And it was just a time in Miami where nobody was doing hip hop. So the only hip hop that I knew of was coming out of New York City. And it wasn't too much longer after that, when I got into high school, that I met these two guys that were part of a crew, a DJ breakdance crew out of Queens, New York, IBM, DJ Finesse and his brother.
Wow.
And so we met. I had gotten a call from somebody and said, well, these two other guys are rapping. You know how it goes. And we kind of shared that common ground. And I remember it was like being in New York whenever I would go to these two cats' house. And so we started rapping and doing routines, and they were trying to teach me how to break dance. I have no rhythm, so I've never really learned how to dance. But interesting enough, I would watch DJ Finesse cut and scratch, and he was teaching me how to mix. The interesting part of it was he was actually Jamaican and, from Jamaican background, but, he was hardcore hip hop, and he was teaching me how to rap and teaching me about sound and equipment. And I remember in my junior year, going into my senior year of high school, I went to New York and a lot of people don't know this, but I had an uncle that owned one of the most famous hip hop clubs in history called Harlem World in New York.
Wow, yes.
And
yes.
my uncle used to own Harlem World. My family on the same block used to own Gene's Candy Store. And so I would spend summers in Gene's Candy Store, and then at night we would go, and because my uncle owned it, we would be able to get in really young into Harlem World, into some of these rap things. So I was very big into the street culture of hip hop coming up, and I used to call myself MC Frankie D. And so I would watch a lot, I would hear a lot. And when I go back to Miami, you know, and met some other people that also were appreciative of the culture, and we eventually created the IBM crew. And with the IBM crew, there were some break dancers. I couldn't really break dance, but I used to rap with this other cat, TK. So I was basically a rapper. So I wasn't really interested in being a DJ. And honestly, truly, it wasn't until I left Miami and moved to Washington, D.C. and restarted the IBM crew. And the reason why I did that, so I'm going to tell you a piece of history that a lot of people don't know.
Okay.
But if you ask people like Red Alert or Biz Markie and all of these classic historic DJs, they were all there that night. In Harlem World, they had a rap competition, and they would have the New York City Rap Convention, they called it. And it was the first time that they would have professionals and amateurs perform and to see who was the best in New York City. And subsequently, I was there that night rapping, and I was there. Dougie D, who's now Dougie Fresh, Red Alert was one of the DJs, Lovebug, Starsky, like all these famous people were in the club.
Wow.
And I actually got into the contest and was deemed the best amateur that night.
Wow. Okay.
But I lived in Miami, and it was a big controversy because it was like, no, you can't win because you don't live in New York. But I lived in Miami. Wind up taking home a trophy anyway back to Miami, and that began me thinking that, hey, maybe I really could do this. So I really started like I was going to be a rapper. But when I got to D.C., I was solo, so I didn't have anybody. It was just me. And one day, I remember I was practicing on some equipment because I knew the concept of DJing, but I didn't know how to do it. And I was practicing scratching in my little efficiency apartment in D.C., and no air conditioning, so the window was open, and I was playing Run DMC, Sucker MCs, and scratching it back and forth. And I get a bang on the door, and this guy is at my door, and he's like, yo, where you from? And I said, I'm from Miami by way of New York. He said, yeah, you have to be from New York if you got that record. And I was like, yeah. He said, that record just came out. I said, yeah, well, I just came back from New York. And him and I became friends. And that created the legendary Frank Ski and Larry G.
Wow.
And Larry G was the consummate DJ. He was a real DJ. But not only that, but Larry G had equipment. He had speakers. He had amplifiers. Like he was a real DJ, and he was going to Howard University, and he was in the arts program, but he was also a graffiti artist. So Larry and I teamed up, and then we also got some kids in D.C. and recreated IBM, and we became one of the top breakdance crews in America behind, the two famous ones, Rocksteady and whatnot out of New York.
Wow.
We were so good that we used to battle them, and, it was a mutual respect felt, but we were in DC, again, another city that was not known for hip hop.
Right. Okay. So Frank, hold on. I don't mean to cut you off. Let's recap really quickly. So you're originally from Harlem, New York, correct?
Right.
Okay, so you're originally from Harlem, but you lived with your father and went to junior high school or high school in Miami, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so you're going back and forth from New York to Miami. This is the early 80s. Early 80s,
yeah.
Right? Okay, so you started out as an MC versus a DJ, right? Okay, so now we jump to, and that's an amazing story about Harlem World, your uncle owning it. That's amazing. So, and I'm sure a lot of people do not know that. So, what got you from Miami to D.C.? Was it college? Was it school?
Yeah, so when I graduated, good question. When I was in high school, I wasn't the best student. I was a C student at best. It wasn't that I couldn't do better. School just wasn't my thing. My dad was a strict disciplinarian, and he would challenge me and punish me all the time. And I think I graduated with a 2-point-something average in high school. So as soon as I graduated high school, I came home and my father was like, my father's Puerto Rican. And he was like, listen, you got 3 choices. And this is the day after I graduated, the day after. And he said, so here's the new rules. He said, you're either going to go to college, you're going to go to the military, or you're going to pay $200 a month rent, which is $50 a week. Now, back then, $50 a week was a lot of money, bro, because, we was making $1 something an hour, right?
Right.
So I had already had a job. I had a lawn business cutting grass. Like, I was very entrepreneurial back then. And I remember that I walked to the University of Miami, or rode my bike, rather, because a lot of my friends were going to the U of M to play football. And I went there, and the lady was like, well, you were supposed to register, you were supposed to apply last year, and I said, oh, I didn't know. She said, well, have you taken the SAT? And back then in Miami, if you were a black kid in Miami, like, nobody gave a shit about us, really. No counselor had ever made me take the SAT. I never took the SAT. I told her, I said, no, I haven't taken the SAT. And it's very different than it is now, where every student takes the SAT, right?
Right.
So I didn't even know what the SAT was. And she was like, well, first you got to take the SAT, then you got to apply. And it was like all this. And I was like, okay, this ain't going to work. And I remember trying to get in the military. But when I was younger, I used to run cross country, and I was a distance runner, and I was pretty good. And I used to want to race bikes, race 10 speeds, and do like Tour de France. And I got hit by a car. So when I told the people in the military I got hit by this car, back then it disqualified me from getting in the military. So then the only thing I had to do was get a job, and I was just ready to leave anyway. And my mother called me and was like, I want you to go to D.C., live with your aunt, and I'm going to pay for you to go to college. Well, my mother really didn't have money, and it was a community college, but it was an alternative. So I left a week after I graduated high school and never looked back. And I went and lived with my aunt for a minute, who turned out to be a disaster for me. And she basically put me out, and I was living on my own. And she basically had moved my stuff to this efficiency, had paid my rent for 2 months, and said, good luck.
Wow.
And
okay.
So I'm in this, you know how it is, bro. And I'm in this apartment, and Larry G knocks on my door.
Wow.
Another part of it was, so Larry taught me how to DJ, and I would rap, he would DJ, but a lot of times I was learning how to DJ. And Larry, because he was at Howard, was able to do all of the New Yorkers Club at Howard was a big deal. Puffy was there, part of the New Yorker Club. And he used to do a lot of parties, and I used to do his parties for him. And it's funny how God works. He puts you in these situations, right? And at the time, my aunt in D.C. worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office and got me a part-time student job. And I started getting into the field of law. So I really thought, and I actually did go to college. I went to UDC, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I never knew you could make money being a DJ, because we never did. But interesting enough, one day, and this is going to blow your mind, one day I'm in the courthouse, and this guy comes up to me in the courthouse, and he says, aren't you the guy that DJs the parties around campus? And I said, yeah. He said, but you breakdance too, right? And I said, yeah, I got a crew. And he said, well, there's a big national breakdance competition coming to D.C., and if you guys win, I want to give you a radio show on the college radio station. And there it was. That was the start of Frank Ski. We won.
So what year would you say this was?
85.
1985. So you went to D.C.
It was
around...
actually like 84. I went to D.C. in 82.
Okay.
And this was about 80, maybe it was the summer of 83, 84, around that time. And we actually won the national breakdance competition in D.C. And the guy came, saw me at the courthouse the next day. I didn't know who he was. He was a lawyer, but he was also the guy who was in charge of WDCU, UDC's radio station. And he gave me a show, and the show was called Breaker's Delight. And there were only at that time 3 radio stations in America that was playing rap music. It was Mr. Magic in New York.
Right.
It was I forgot the girl who was doing it in Philly. I always forget her name, and I'm so mad.
Lady B.
Because Lady B, right? She's so dope. Yep. And then it was me, Frank Ski, and with Breaker's Delight.
Wow.
And actually, what happened was it was the summer, and Larry was spending his summers back home in New York working for his father, Larry G. So I did the show by myself. So I would actually do the mixes and do the show. And it was a bunch of shout outs and a bunch of breakdancing crews. And it was DC's introduction into hip hop. And it was a 1 hour show, but we had the top rated show in DC, and it was only on for 1 hour. And everybody was trying to get at me. And when Larry came back at the end of the summer, the manager of the radio station would not let him on the show with me because he felt like, he was like, why do you need him? You're doing it by yourself. And I was like, that's my partner.
Right.
And he was like, no, you don't have a partner. It's Frank Ski. And I remember that was the first hard decision I had to make, because on one hand, I could have quit the show, but look where it got me, right? And on the other hand, I really lost a relationship with a person who was really responsible of teaching me how to DJ, which was Larry G.
Wow. So would you say that you started DJing in 85? Or
Yeah, I mean, really, like solo DJing myself. Yeah, it was around 85 where I was doing parties actually by myself, and being hired to do events and stuff by myself was probably 1985.
And was Frank Ski your first DJ name, and where did that come from?
So I picked it up in New York. So in New York at the time, when hip hop first started, a lot of DJs and rappers were calling themselves whatever their name was, and they would put a D on the end. So like Dougie Fresh was Dougie D. There were a lot of D's, somebody D, and I was Frankie D. And then there came a time where people were putting Ski on the back of their name. I picked it up and put Ski on the back of their name. A lot of people were saying that the Ski tag was part of the drug culture. I didn't really see it that way. I just heard other people do it, and I just copied that. But that was my first DJ name, yes.
Got you. So you did this radio show, which was truly a hip-hop radio show, and you said it was called Breaker's Delight, right?
Breaker's Delight, yep.
So you're doing this radio show in D.C. This is 1985, right? So when did the Baltimore transition happen? What came out of this?
So what happened was, we were only on that show for Saturdays for 1 hour. And I had gotten an offer by a radio station that was a mainstream station in D.C. And the program director wanted me to come on Saturdays on a mainstream station, and they were actually going to pay me. But he asked me to change my name. And he told me that he thought Frank Ski was too juvenile and immature. So he asked me to change the name. I thought about it, and I turned him down. And when I turned him down, it was like a big deal for a lot of people, because people felt like that was my entry, like you could have been big on this station. And I just felt like there was something about Frank Ski, because that's what everybody called me. Like I was already doing festivals. Like I was doing street festivals in D.C. I was doing the biggest parties in D.C. I was the most sought after DJ in Washington, D.C. at the time. And then I get a call from a guy named Chuck Max, who ran an AM radio station in Baltimore. And he said, I want you to come, and I'm going to give you a full show on the weekend, Friday and Saturday. So I wasn't getting paid on the college station, so I took the money because I wasn't making no money.
Right.
And I actually did it. And it was interesting because once I took the money on that radio station, I didn't know that there was another station in town, which was V103 Baltimore, which was the big station in Baltimore.
Right.
And once I started beating up on them in the ratings, they came after me. And when they came after me, it kind of changed the whole trajectory of just being a DJ into being a radio personality. And eventually I moved over and started doing V103 FM, same slot. I had, Saturday and Sunday, and I did that for, I would probably say about a year, but Rip, I was getting so huge on the DJ scene.
Right.
And being on the radio, playing my own mixes. And you got to understand, there weren't very many radio stations in America that had mix shows. Like outside of New York, there wasn't there were a lot of other cities, but nobody was having mix shows. And, when you're in 1985, 86, when hip hop was, in its infancy, getting to be mainstream, that was like a really big deal for me. I remember that I was still working at the law firm, and there was a guy who, it was a lawyer that I worked for, and his name was Mike Lubin. And Mike Lubin was probably the person that most singularly changed my whole life. And Mike Lubin called me in his office, and he shows me a picture he shows me the DC paper. And the DC paper is like this free, weekly newspaper that comes out in Washington, D.C. And on the front was my picture. And it was like the best of DC. And on the front is my picture.
Wow.
And he looks at me and says, "Is this you?" And I said, yeah. He said, you're kidding me. I said, no. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I work here, bro. Like, this is my job. Like, I can't buy records if I don't have a job. And DJing don't pay you enough money to buy equipment and buy records. So he said to me, you have to make a decision in your life if you're going to go after what you love, or you just going to keep chasing money to pay your bills. And I remember having that conversation with him, and he basically changed my whole idea of life. And I remember that he said, well, what are you doing now? And I said, I'm working weekends in Baltimore, and I have this college radio show, but I'm working weekends in Baltimore. And he said, why are you only on the weekends if you're the best? I said, well, they already got somebody that works during the week. And I kid you not, he said, I want you to take a week off and you do a vacation. And he said, call me during the week. Mike Lubin picked up the phone and called the radio station in Baltimore, told them who he was, that he represented me. And in 2 days, the guy who was doing nights was fired.
Wow.
And I was moved into the 6 to 10 nighttime show. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to share this with you because I think most DJs need to understand this concept, because this is the piece that we've lost in the DJ culture. The DJ has always been the most important piece of the party. Forget what anybody says. It's always been the DJ and always will be.
Right.
And I remember that he asked me what I was doing in the street money. And at the time, in the early 80s and mid 80s, I was making $300 a party. Now, $300 a party is a lot of money back then.
Right.
But I had to bring my own equipment. I had to have people helping me with my records. And, it was a lot to bring Frank Ski out because there was so many people coming to the party. And he asked me a question. He asked me how much I made, and I told him $300. And he said, how many people come and see you? And I said, 500, 1,000. The number, it's always big whenever I go out.
Right.
And he said, well, how many times are you going out? I said 3, 4, 5 times a week. And he said, so you're getting $300, 3, 4, 5 times a week? And I said, yep. And I said, I do pretty good. That's good money.
Right.
And he said, now you're on the radio 6 to 10. So now your value has gone up. And I said, well, this is what I said, and I need every DJ to understand. I told him, if I charge more money, they're not going to use me and they're going to hire somebody else. And he said, if they charge more money, if they don't pay you more money and they don't use you, they're not going to have the best because you're the best. And people are going to want to have the best. And he said, so from now on, you can't speak for yourself anymore. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, from now on, I'm going to represent you. And what's going to happen is they're going to pay you up front $300, or they're going to give you $1 for every person that comes to your parties. And up until that time, I had never really counted. I just was guesstimating how many people were coming.
Right.
And he told me, he said, this weekend at your party, I had a Sunday night party I used to do in Baltimore that is famous in Baltimore called Super Sundays. And I was doing my Super Sunday party for somebody, a promoter. And he called them, and they agreed to give me $1 a person because they didn't want to lose me. And to them, paying me $1 a person was really based upon what I drew, right? How many people came.
Right.
And I hired a girlfriend to sit at the front door with a clicker. The party started at 8 o'clock. I didn't come on till midnight. I went midnight to 2, and the party is over, and I'm hanging out with my friends, and this girl is looking nervous as shit. She's like, we got to go home now. And I said, what do you mean we got to go now? She said, we got to go right now. Get your stuff. We have to. And Baltimore is a rough city for anybody that knows.
Right.
So I knew something was up. So my guys helped me pack my stuff in the back of my pickup truck. I had a pickup truck, dude. And we went to an efficiency that had no air conditioning, hot. It was in a row house. It was like, where you go, it was like a house that was converted into some apartments, and this one little room in the corner was mine. And I remember we got there and we went upstairs. She's nervous as shit, and she pulls out a lunch bag, like a brown lunch bag, and she pours it out on the bed, and all this money comes out of the lunch bag. And I'm like, oh shit. I said, how many people came? She said 1,300.
Well, there's $1,300 right there, right?
I said, so I went from 300, the same party, 300 the week before, to 1,300 the next week. Now, because I'm getting paid by how many people are coming, what am I doing? I'm pumping the shit out of my parties, right?
Right.
So I'm helping the promoter pass out flyers. Flyers was the social media back then.
Yep.
I'm on the radio shouting it out. I'm doing my commercials. I'm doing a mix, dedicating it to my parties. I'm doing everything on my show, whatever the station's making money because they're advertising. I'm making more money in the street. Everybody's happy. If I asked you, how much money do you think I made? And like, this is like I want to say this is 1987. How much money do you think I made in 1 year DJing parties?
Tax-free, it's a lot of money.
What do you think? Give me a number.
So you said maybe, how many parties did you do a week? One a week, right?
No, I did a few a week.
Okay. So
some more people than others, but yeah.
So maybe, $7,000, $8,000 a month in just that, right? So I don't know, maybe $100,000. Let's just take that number.
I made $240,000 in 1987.
And just
DJing parties.
Wow.
And I don't say that to be braggadocious because I don't make nearly that much anymore, but I will tell you that it's all about knowing your worth. It's all about building your brand. I got to the point where here's what I did to make sure people would hire me. I had the best sound system. I went back to Miami. I hired Negril Disco, the Jamaican crews from down in Miami, to build me a sound system. I had a Jamaican sound system in Baltimore that was killing. I had a light show. I invested my money and bought a U-Haul type of truck to carry my equipment around. I had 5 dudes that worked with me at all my parties, and they would get there before me, set up my stuff. And when you had a regular DJ in Baltimore, you had some shitty-ass sound system and no lights and whatever. But when you hired Frank Ski, it was like a concert. It was like a production, right?
Full production, yes.
So I invested in myself to make sure that I was the one people hired. Like, you can't skimp out as a DJ on your equipment. You can't skimp out on your sound. I didn't rely on clubs. I hear DJs all the time, well, the club sound system sounds like shit. Well, bring your own.
Right.
Oh, the equipment is messed up. The damn CDJs don't work. The mixer's garbage. The promoter or the club owner don't put no money in it. Dude, that's excuses, boss.
Yeah.
Like, if this is what you do, if this is who you are, bring your own shit.
Right.
Bring your own.
Know your worth. Know your worth.
Bring your own.
And invest in yourself.
You ain't seeing these artists that are on these mega stages using house microphones. They bring their own microphone.
You're right.
They bring in their own board. They bring in their own guitars. You think these groups are using somebody else's equipment all the time? Not when it's that important.
Right.
They traveling with their own stuff, and nobody touches their stuff.
Right.
And I'm telling you, dude, if we got back to understanding the importance of who we are as DJs and making sure, forget the fact that, now I kid you not, I was in DC a couple years ago doing radio and helping them out, and a promoter wanted me to come do his happy hour and whatever, and I was like, okay, cool, what are you paying? And he was like, $300. I was like, boss, I was making $300 in DC in 1987.
Right.
I'm not about to make $300 in 2017. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
But guess what? His party still went on. He still had other DJs, but he ain't had me.
Right. He couldn't pay for the quality. Like your attorney representation back then said, he couldn't pay for the best, right?
That's it. So but once you start understanding what you do and who you are, guess what the next step is? Okay, so my next progression in Baltimore was, it got to the point where, I would have DJs open and close for me, and then promoters was using my open and closing DJ and not hiring me. So what did I have to do? My open and closing DJs are some of the most famous DJs you would know, bro. And guess what I told them? Dude, you can go out on your own. I give you my blessing. I'll even come to your party and support you. You'll find me at the bar drinking, supporting you, bringing people to see you, but you can't work for me.
Right, got it.
Right? So if you want to go on your own, go. I give you my blessing, but you can't work for me because I'm not going to be on the radio pumping your name up for you to be my competition.
Right. Absolutely.
So what I eventually did was, my same lawyer, he was like, why don't you throw your own parties? He said, what are the promoters actually doing? I said, passing out flyers. He said, you can't do that? You can't print your own flyers and hire a street team yourself to promote your own parties? Nobody can promote you better than you.
Right.
I got the blessing from the radio station to buy my own advertising. What's the rate? $2,000. Okay, I pay the radio station the $2,000. I buy my own flyers. I get my own street team. I already got my own sound, and I go out and work my own deals. And that's exactly what I did. And now the promoters are mad at me, and I'm like, y'all can still hire me. You just can't hire me on Sundays no more because that's my night.
And this
So-
this was the Super Sundays event, right?
Super Sundays. Yeah, and we did that, until I left Baltimore. But, another piece that I think people got to understand is, and I know this is a DJ show, and I heard what you said in the beginning. So I'm going to try to give the best advice that I can give. So many DJs are so disgruntled and resentful and mad because they're not where they are, where they want to be, or where they see themselves, that resentment, that being upset, that being mad plays out in their set, because they get to the point where they know, but at the end of the day, it ain't up to me knowing. I'm playing to a crowd of people. If I'm playing to a crowd of people, I got to get there early. I got to see what they feeling. I got to feel them out. And I'm not sitting home like planning my set for the party, because, dude, I don't know what I'm going to play. I don't know till I get there, right? So when I get there, I'm playing for the people. I'm not playing for me. You can't come to my DJ booth and drop $100 to play your record. I'm not going to do that. I have to play the hits, and that's what I'm going to do. Keep your 100. I love it. Thank you, but I'm not going to do it. It's not going to happen with me. And I think a lot of these DJs out here are going out and they're cheapening who they are, and they're so freaking good, dude. They're so good, but they're so mad. They don't take requests, right? I don't care. People come up in the DJ booth all night long.
Yeah.
I let them come up. Y'all paid to get in.
Right.
How am I going to tell you can't come up and say hi? How am I not going to shout you out for your birthday? How am I going to let you pay $20 to get in and then charge you $20 for a shout out?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? I'm not going to do it. But guess what else I'm not going to do? I'm not going to work at a club where they treat the customers like shit. I'm not going to work at a club where they gouging people outside to park their cars.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it, because then it comes back on me, because people are like, yo, we came to see you and they treated us bad.
Right.
So you got to get to the point of going back to doing it because you love it and doing it because you want to do. When I was in Baltimore making that money, you know where I was at on a Tuesday and Wednesday night? I was in bars. I would have bars, because in Baltimore, they have these. Baltimore is a city where one side of the bar is a liquor store and the other side's a bar, right? And they might have like a little dance floor or maybe no dance floor, but every bar in Baltimore got a DJ booth. And I would go in the DJ booth and I'd play records by myself.
Right.
And would not charge nobody. Because I wanted to test the songs. But I'm not going to test the song in the middle of my set.
Right.
When I got a packed dance floor.
Right. Absolutely.
But I see DJs doing that all the time. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
It might be the hottest new record. Everybody's like, oh, this record is hot, whatever. I got to see somebody else play it and see the response, because I'm not going to be the test dummy. I'm playing hits, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm playing proven hits. Just because I didn't play the newest record ain't going to change people's idea about how well I rock the party. People don't remember. You can ask anybody who went to a party this past weekend, what did the DJ play? They're going to tell you the same 5 songs, right?
Right.
Because they all playing the same 5. They're going to tell you, oh, he played the new so-and-so? No. It ain't like that no more.
It isn't. And you're absolutely right. So let's go to this. So you were on the radio. You went from college radio in Baltimore to commercial radio, right? You were on V103 in Baltimore from 1988 to 96. And then you were on WERQ in Baltimore from 96 to 98. So clearly, I mean, since you got on radio in Baltimore, you stayed on radio until you left, right? So Talk to me just a little quickly about your longevity in radio, just in the Baltimore area. What was the formula of the success?
So the formula of the success really was a lot about timing and the fact that Baltimore was a city that danced. And that's really important to understand. So Baltimore is a city that really had 2 segments of people. When I got to Baltimore, there was one segment of people called hoppers. And basically that was a hit. That was what they call people that were into hip hop.
Okay.
Hopper parties, nobody danced. The DJs only scratched and put on the show. Nobody danced.
Okay.
So then you had the club crowd. And the club crowd was a mixture of gay and straight, but it was a lot of dance music and house music, right? And house music was just becoming popular. And there was a club in Baltimore where there was only one other club in the country that could rival its sound system, because the sound system was made by the same person. the sound system in the garage in New York and the sound system at Odell's in Baltimore were made by the same guy. So every dance performing artist in the world wanted to perform at those two, the garage in New York and Odell's in Baltimore. And Odell's, the club side, the hoppers would come, and on one night they may be at the club dancing the club music. On the other night, they're standing around dancing the hip hop. Nobody had infused the two together
Gotcha.
until I took Super Sundays to Baltimore. And the timing was, there was also a set of music that was coming out of Europe at the time that was very heavily based on James Brown samples and James Brown type of drums.
Yes.
And that music was the bridge to bring the hip hop crew to dance. And it wasn't the same music as they were playing in the gay clubs. It was harder, and it had an edge, and the snares were louder, right? The bass hit harder, the snares were louder, and the drums were different. And I remember I was doing Super Sundays at Odell's, and that music was coming out of Europe. And there was a record store in Baltimore that I would go to, and at Old Town Mall in Baltimore, and there were DJs, Scotty B, who became a big Baltimore club producer, Sean Caesar, and Sean Caesar now is the head of Downtown Locker Room, DTLR, and Sean Marshall, Mark Henry. These are the guys that worked in this record store, and I would go there every week, and they were the ones that were bringing all this music in from Europe. And I was playing that music on Sunday nights. Then that music became Baltimore Club. I remember that there was a time when I went and was sampling a lot of this music for my mixes on the radio station.
Okay.
There was a lot of instrumental stuff, right?
Right.
So nobody had put really vocals to it yet. And then one time I sampled a Two Live Crew record, and the Two Live Crew record was, I think it was Come On Baby, and it had the sample that I used in Doo-Doo Brown. But I sampled it and looped it and was using it as a mix for my show. And people would call in, they'd be like, I want to hear that Doo-Doo Brown mix. That mix that goes, that Doo-Doo Brown. I want to hear that mix. And so somebody broke into my locker at the radio station and stole it.
Wow.
So the young me is pissed off, but the Mike Lubin me was like, well, if somebody stole it, that means people want it, then that means you need to sell it. And I said, well, how am I going to sell it? He said, make it into a record. I said, I don't know nothing about making records. And he said, you do. You got friends. And I said, I do have friends. So I remember calling my friend Stan Evans, who became my partner, and his wife was the sister of jazz artist Kim Waters. And I called Kim Waters and I said, Kim, I want to make this record. What do I need to buy? And he gave me a list of equipment. Rip, I'm telling you, I went to the store. I bought all the equipment he told me to buy. I was good with plugging in sound, so I knew how sound worked.
Right.
And I used to set up my own sound systems. So I put this in my basement. I had a table, and I had all this equipment piled on the table. And then I had, this equipment that I didn't know how to use none of that. And Kim Waters came over, and he showed me how to put the sample into this Akai sampler. And now it was playing, and I was like, oh. And I said, well, it needs a bass line. And he said, well, what do you want the bass line to sound like? And I remember I hummed the Doo-Doo Brown bass line, and he played it on the keyboard. And I said, no, it needs to be lower. No, it needs to have more bass. It needs to have a lot of bass. Mm-hmm. And he was putting it in there. And then we added a drum pattern in there, and the track for Doo-Doo Brown was born, but it had no vocals. And I remember saying to myself, this is not really going to sell as much as it should because it doesn't have no vocals.
Right.
And I remember that weekend I went to my wife at the time, she was like, well, let's go up to a bed and breakfast at the winery. And so we went up to this bed and breakfast at the winery in Virginia. Like, we drove like 2 hours, and I remember it was like nothing out there, bro. It was like cow pastures.
Right.
And my mind was extremely clear, and I started thinking about the song and humming it in my head. And on the drive up, I heard an old song on one of these country radio stations, and it was like Bad Bad Leroy Brown. And I was like, oh shit, I should call myself Doodoo Brown. And I remember I wrote it, and I still wasn't happy with it. I thought it needed something else, and I asked my guy Stanley, I said, just come in here and scream stuff at the end of my hooks, because I'm not really that good of a rapper, so let me just do a couple lines and then say something. Do a couple lines and say something. And I said, do like Flavor Flav would. Just get on there. Yeah, just shout.
Right.
And he did it. And Doodoo Brown was created. Part of my longevity in Baltimore was because what I did not realize that I was actually doing was creating a culture, or I was a member of a group of people that created a culture in Baltimore. Those parties, the Super Sunday parties, that music became the culture of Baltimore. And it still is today. That culture is like creating go-go in D.C.
Right.
It's like creating bounce in New Orleans. It's like creating, West Coast hip-hop. It became a culture, that sound. And that sound was the soundtrack of the city. And all I had to do was keep feeding it. And as I became older and I went from nights to morning, my conversation became older.
Right.
I started maturing as a person. So I was talking to older people, even though they had started out with me at 16. Now they're 26. They were 10. Now they're 25, and these people became my base. And I really felt like if I wanted to go in politics, I could have become mayor of Baltimore. But I was getting in so much trouble, dude. I was a menace to society. The police department hated me.
Wow.
I had a love-hate relationship with the mayor because I was doing parties and bringing 3,000 black kids to events. And they always ended with fights. It always ended, I'd have to hire 15, 20 police officers at every one of my parties. It was crazy. My security bill was astronomical. But I made sure nobody got shot at my parties. But they were shooting up the city. Baltimore had the highest murder rate in America. Right. And they were shooting up the city, but I made sure that I had relationships with all the gangs, all the head of all the gangs, all the big drug dealers. Like, I knew them personally. And if there was a beef in the city and something going down, I would meet with the gang leaders and be like, look, I know y'all got beefs. Like, y'all have right to have beef. It's between y'all. I said, but this right here is for the city. And these kids, they need this. So can we make this neutral turf? And we created areas in the club where one gang would be in that corner and the other gang would be in the other corner. And they all respected the code, that they did not cross that line. And I think when you invest in a city and you become part of the culture of that city, you have longevity. Like Funkmaster Flex was the culture of New York with Hot 97.
Right.
So he will always have longevity. You get what I'm saying? Because
Absolutely.
He was part of the culture that ushered in hip-hop music on Hot 97 in New York.
So let's talk about this this club music, this Baltimore club music, because this whole time you're on the radio in Baltimore and you're doing your events, the Super Sundays, you're doing them at Odell's. Obviously, that was one of the biggest, legendary clubs. I have a friend named DJ Stu who's from Baltimore, and he's mentioned this club to me before. And I used to live in D.C. for a while, and I've heard of the stories of Odell's. But you became a recording artist. You're a DJ doing events. You're on the radio. You're Frank Ski. But now you become Doodoo Brown, and you put out this club, this house music, and you become a pioneer of making, hip house or Baltimore club or hip hop house, however you categorize it. You perfectly blended hip hop drums with house music, and you came up with Doodoo Brown. So I need a little clarification on this, because first off, I didn't even know that was you rhyming in the record until a few years back. I've heard this song a million times, and it's a classic. But that's amazing that was you rhyming in the record as well. So you released this record and correct me if I'm wrong, you released this record in 1992. Right. So you put out the classic house record, Whores in This House, in 92, and another track called Tony's Bitch Track as Frank Ski, right?
Yep, and Pull Your Guns Out.
Right. So then there is the record by two hype brothers and a dog called Doodoo Brown. right?
That's me. Yep.
That's you too. Okay.
Right.
So then you put out, let me see, we got Whores in This House in 92, Tony's Bitch in 92, Doodoo Brown. Then you got Your Rollin' Doodoo in 1992 and Greeks in This House in 92. And all of these are on Deco Records. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so just really quickly, give me just a little clarification on where did Deco Records come from and why were you Doodoo Brown and the two hype brothers and the dog and this whole dynamic? Explain it just really quickly.
So in Baltimore, I used to have a bodyguard everywhere I went. And it was more so a partner than just, I wouldn't call him my bodyguard. It was just my hanging partner, but he was a bodyguard. And Baltimore is a dangerous city. So there were times where, you know, people would come in and be looking for somebody to shoot up the club or whatever, or even threats against me for whatever stupid shit. And I really got, as I got older and was not really in that crazy lifestyle no more, and this is around the time I was starting to do the records, I felt that I wanted a dog instead of a person. And I went to a guy and he talked me into bringing in a really high quality German Shepherd from Germany. And so I brought this dog in as a puppy named Rondo, and I trained him like this dog. I can walk up to McDonald's and tell him to sit outside. I can go in and eat for an hour and come back. He'd still be sitting there, not tied up.
Okay.
He was that type of dog, right? And so everywhere I went, Rondo was with me. Every party I did, Rondo was with me. I go to the radio station and Rondo would be up under the console. And
wow.
So when I did the record, I didn't know what to call myself, except I knew the Doodoo Brown. And then Stanley was so hyped. He was the hype man. So we became like, and I was a DJ, so I knew how to be a hype man. So we became two hype brothers. But I always had Rondo, and he was the dog. And two hype brothers and a dog was made. Now, Mike Lubin, after I made the record, Mike Lubin wanted to make sure I had ownership in all of my stuff. So we created our own record label. And he was like, you know, we'll get signed to a major maybe, but you're going to have your own record label so you can always own this. And I remember that going back and forth to Miami, you know, because I still have family down there, that, you know, the Art Deco district in South Beach started getting real hot. And I remember like stealing that, like Deco, like Art Deco. And that became Deco Records. And
wow.
So the problem was that I actually did Doodoo Brown as a single. And then the other songs that you mentioned came out on a compilation called Frank Ski Club Tracks. And Club Tracks were basically the concept of how I came up with Doodoo Brown. I would take these loops and samples and make these party tracks for DJs to use. It was like a DJ tool.
Right.
Tony was a drag queen in Baltimore that would always come to my parties, and he would vogue across like it'd be a straight hip-hop thug party, and Tony would vogue his way across the floor. Tony was massively loved in Baltimore. Everybody knew Tony was, they called him Gay Tony and Big Tony and everything else, but he was so gutter and so ratchet. And Tony eventually became one of my partners on the radio because I brought him on the radio to do exactly what he did in the clubs. And Tony, I remember him voguing on the floor, and he would do this woo 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 across the floor. And I made a track with his hook, and it became like a big track on the first club track. And then I went back in and with a guy who was helping me in the studio use this house track, and I told Tony to get on there and talk shit and be gay as hell, and he was. And he did Tony's Bitch track. And then with the Hoes in the House, I remember I had Luke. So a lot of people don't know my relationship with Luke, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So Luke came and performed at Super Sundays, and we were at this place called the Sports Bar. And basically the dance floor was a boxing ring. And
wow,
people would walk up to this boxing ring, and that was kind of like the dance floor, right? But they had these light rafters in the roofs, and there were so many people getting in to try to see Luke that these girls were climbing the rafters and hanging on the trestles to see Luke. And I remember being in the back of the room, and I looked at one of my boys, and I was like, man, there's a lot of hoes in this house. And he was like, absolutely. And like, dude, I'm telling you, it's God. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a song, call it There's Some Hoes in the House. And I shit you not. So when we went to try to sign Doodoo Brown, it was growing so fast, Rip. It was growing so fast where I couldn't afford to keep it no more. So what people don't know is back then, if you were independent and you were making your own record, this is before CDs. So if you were making your own record,
Right.
you basically went to the studio, you got a master. You would send the master to a pressing plant. The pressing plant would charge you $400 to make a plate. The plate was the stamp that they would make the records with, right?
Right. The acetate.
So
the acetate.
yeah. So the plates would always break. So you'd have to have a certain amount of plates, right? And then they would make this record, and it would cost you about $1 to make the record, put it in the record sleeve, shrink wrap it, and put a label on it. So it was like $1. So it would cost $1, right? So then I couldn't put them in the stores. I had to give them to a distributor. So, and this is like a math that people should understand. Distributors had 90 days to pay you back. So 3 months. The record stores had 90 days to pay the distributor. So the distributor had 90 days to pay you after they got the money from the record store. So your first $1 might take 6 months to get the money back. So our first run for Doo-Doo Brown was 1,000 records, and it went into a couple record stores in Baltimore, and it sold out the first day. So the second run was 2,000, and it sold out the same day.
Wow.
By the third week, we were pressing 5,000 records a week, and I was funding it through my parties. So I was still on top of it, right? But I still wasn't getting paid from the distributor because we're only in the third or fourth week.
Right.
Then DC picked up on it. And when DC picked up on it, it became a regional record, and my next run was 10,000 records. Sold out. Every weekend the records were pressed, they would sell out. So now we're at 10,000, and now it's sold out. And I remember putting this $10,000 a week up for a few weeks, and all of a sudden my brother calls me in Miami. Now, when I made Doo-Doo Brown, I went to Luke, and I went and met with Luke. But Luke never showed up to the meeting. And I flew, because I was doing a radio show. So I got off, I had to be back in Baltimore to do my nighttime radio show. So I flew up early in the morning, like the first flight out. I got to Luke Records like 9 a.m. expecting him to be there. He never shows up. I waited till like 2 o'clock or whatever flight I had to take back to be back on the air at 6, and he never shows up. I get off the plane, and he calls me and apologizes. He said, I got the record. I heard it. I don't like it. And I said, okay. He said, well, you go ahead and put it out. So I said, okay. So the record is out. The record hits in Miami, and it hit on Power 96's nighttime show, Battle of the Records, right?
Right.
And I think it was DJ Laz who was on the air. And the Battle of the Records, they're playing Luke's, I forgot what Luke song was out back then. And it was like the #1 song for like 2 months straight, bro. And then they played Doo-Doo Brown. My brother is in Miami, and he calls me, and I'm listening on the phone. And it's like, Doo-Doo Brown, Doo-Doo Brown, Doo-Doo Brown, Doo-Doo Brown. The song wins. The next day, the distributor calls me and said, the distributor in Miami needs 50,000 records next week.
Wow.
I didn't have $50,000.
Right, right.
But Luke calls me, and he's like, we got to talk. I was like, dude, this thing is taking off. He said, I want to talk to you. But before that, Stanley had an uncle that worked, named Joey Bonner, that worked for this record company, Warlock Records.
Right.
And Warlock, they put out, you know, a lot of good stuff back then, like a lot of Todd Terry music and stuff like that.
Right, right.
And Warlock actually made an offer to distribute the record for us. I was waiting for Columbia Records. I get a call from Columbia Records the same time as I'm getting a call from Warlock Records. I'm trying to get on, I forgot what label it was, out of L.A., big label in L.A. And I talked to the people in L.A., and they're like, oh, well, you know, when you do the next records, we need you, like, to smoke weed and get drunk in the studio because your rap sounds too corny. So the only person that really took us was Warlock. And Warlock says, we need you to get on a plane this weekend, and we need you to go to our studio in Cleveland, Ohio, or Cincinnati, Ohio, and we need you to record an album. They told me this, and I had 2 days to come up with 10 songs to put on an album.
Wow.
I didn't have 10 songs.
Right.
I had a couple in my head. I didn't have 10. And we had a guy named T, who was a friend of Stanley's that was doing music, Al T. And I remember calling Al T, and Al T played me a bunch of different tracks. And I said, I'll buy these tracks from you. So I bought them straight out. And we went in the studio. Now, I had done the sample for Hoes in the House, and I already had that. But we didn't put Hoes in the House on the first album. Big mistake. We didn't put I don't think Tony's Bitch track was on the first album. It might have, no, it wasn't. And we didn't put Tony's Bitch track on the first album. Big mistake. Right. So the first album had, You're Rolling Doodoo and Doodoo Brown, and those were the songs that really were the first two Hype Brothers and the Dog stuff. So then the other stuff became Frank Ski stuff. And a lot of people never put two and two together. That was the same person. On the other side of Hoes in the House was Pull Your Guns Out. And that right there, them two songs were huge, and Warlock took them under their wing, and Warlock never paid me for them. Warlock dogged me out. They only paid me. We found out that Warlock was pressing records all over the world, and they were only sending me invoices from one record pressing plant. And they wanted me to pay, in order to sue Warlock to get all my royalties, they wanted me to pay like $200,000 to do a forensic accounting of Warlock Records. And with all the shit that they were doing, I never really got paid from Doodoo Brown like I should have, or from Hoes in the House, or from Tony's Bitch track. I get paid now because like I own it now.
Right.
But back then when Warlock was distributing it, I didn't.
So with that being said, I mean, that's an incredible story, by the way. And no, I did not put two and two together. I thought it was just two different people putting out the same type of a song. So with all that being said, now when there's people sampling Doodoo Brown or any of these records, how do you feel about that? And do you get royalties? And do you clear those records now?
Yeah, I clear them. For instance, so this is how God works. So the radio industry, is in really a big turmoil right now. So the radio industry is not really paying people the way they used to pay. But now I got 3 kids in college, right? And I remember last year, at the beginning of the year, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay Franklin's, deposit for his college tuition. And he wanted to go to LSU, and it's like really expensive, right? And my other 2 kids are still in private school in Atlanta. And I'm like, God, I don't even know how I'm going to pay for this. And dude, I kid you not, Lil Wayne calls me and samples Hoes in the House. And I get like a huge check. And I also get a piece of everything that record made because that's my song. I own it 100%. I know right now, that Cardi B has just sampled Hoes in the House. Right. And I haven't heard the song, but it's coming out on her new album. And everybody says it's going to be a huge, I don't know what Cardi B has done, but it's going to be big. So, but I appreciate people sampling Doodoo Brown. And Chris Brown sampled Doodoo Brown last year. Right. And a song that was like dope, and he never put it out. So I don't know if that's ever coming. It may, because sometimes these artists put out songs like 2 years later. But there's a lot of music that they're like sampling. I know that when I did the Wobble, my head was like in a different place, and I didn't get as much royalties off of it as I should have gotten. But Wobble is my record. So
I didn't know that. Wow.
And they play Wobble at every damn wedding, every damn resort around the world, every cruise ship, every Wobble is like the line dance song of the decade, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's me with the all the shorties in the club. Let me see you just like that's me.
Nice.
Yeah. So so the music thing, I actually just finished building my studio in my house. I'm trying to get up to speed on all the new technology because my son Harrison is taken after me, and he's making like music better than I ever did. And I'm just trying to help him, to guide so he doesn't make the same mistakes I made. But he's truly a creative person. And so I'm actually going to put out a compilation this year of the best of Frank Ski, and I'm going to put that compilation together.
Nice.
And it'll have all of these songs on it where people will be having access to it once again. And I'm going to put some new stuff on there.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you what was the end result? Why did you stop making these club classic records? And
interesting. I want to tell you about that. So it's real easy. So I had moved from nights to mornings. And as a producer and making music, you'll find that most hip hop artists do like their best work at night.
Right.
And, they get up late and then they spend hours and hours in the studio and they record these songs to in the morning, right?
Yep.
And sometimes they leave the studio, they'll go to the strip club, then they'll go back to the studio. And they get like this real creative vibes from being in the street. When I was doing these hit records, I was in the street every night. When I got on the morning show, I stopped being able to be in the street every night. And I remember I had this contest to find a new MC. And I found this kid named Mystic in Baltimore. And he could rhyme Jamaican, he could do English, he was dope, his lyrics were fly. And he won this contest, and I signed him, and I did this record with him. Probably musically one of the best records I've ever produced, and I still think it's that way now. And I remember I go down to the Winter Music Conference with the track, and I'm standing outside a ballroom, and old school, like I'm Frank Ski, but I'm standing outside the ballroom with a boombox playing this track, How You Want to Carry It. And I remember the head of the New York record pool comes up to me and is like, Frank, that shit is amazing. And I said, yeah, man. He said, but it's missing a bass line. And I was like, nah, dude, it's got bass line. And he said, no, there ain't no bass line on that. All this time, Rip, I'm hearing the bass line because I made the song.
Right.
So I heard the bass line. I know I recorded a bass line for the song.
Right.
But for some reason, when I was mixing the song down, I never pushed the button for the bass to come in. But I heard it. And I think I was burning the candle at both ends. I was like getting ahead of myself. And I never put the bass line on there. And I realized at that point, I can't do both. Like I can't be great doing the morning show and then staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning in the recording studio.
Right.
And I eventually stopped making the music. It was a mistake. I should have really continued with it, because after that I did songs for I did 99 and a half for the gospel artist Hezekiah Walker, and he won a Stellar. Like my mix on the song won a Gospel Stellar Award, but I was so busy I didn't go to get my award.
Right.
And it was just stuff like that that just made me say, you gotta make a choice. But I think now I'm ready to go back and do it.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you still got it in you, because it sounds like radio, basically your radio career, took precedence over your recording career. And you have a stellar radio career as well. So it's, one or the other, right? But do you remember what you were using? What did you use to produce those classic house records?
MPC 3000.
Okay.
And I still have it.
Very nice. Very nice. So you were in radio in Baltimore until 98, if that's correct. And then you moved to Atlanta. Talk to me about the transition from V103 in Baltimore to V103 in Atlanta, correct?
Well, it was 92Q in Baltimore. It was a tough move, because what really happened was, and you're like the only person I've ever told this to.
Well, thank you.
I had gotten a call because at that time, Donnie Simpson was the head radio person, urban in America.
Right.
And he was having an issue of whether or not he was going to sign his contract to go back to WPGC in Baltimore. And I received a call from the program director at that time that said, if Donnie doesn't sign, we want to talk to you. I remember that I had basically finished in Baltimore. I had done everything I could in Baltimore. Like there was nothing else I could do. I remember that I really wanted to make a change. I had just gotten married. I felt that I had outgrown what I could do in Baltimore on radio. And if I wanted to be big, I had to go to a bigger market. And DC was that market.
Right.
And Donnie wound up signing his contract. He made a record-breaking amount of money. And they asked me if I would consider going to Atlanta, because they had another station, a sister station in Atlanta, that used to be the sister station of the other station I worked in Baltimore, V103. And I remember saying, I am not going to country Atlanta, like Atlanta's country, because I would come down here for Doo-Doo Brown and do Freaknik. And I remember it was country.
Right.
And so I eventually come to Atlanta, and I had a friend who took me out every night for a week. And I remember going to a different party every night and was thinking, Atlanta is popping. Like I was thoroughly impressed. And I went out one night and they were doing the Outkast album release, and I was at that party, and I was at this party and this party. And it was just, I was really thoroughly impressed with the party scene. And what I was thinking is all the money I can make doing parties, right?
Right.
And I remember that eventually I went ahead and made the switch and came to Atlanta. And that was really a pivotal moment for my career because I was now on a mainstream urban in a big city. Atlanta's like market like 8 and DC is like market 6, so it was, or something like that. And it was still big, but I really felt like it was fun. Like Atlanta was fun, man. I was here and helping to usher in this Atlanta movement.
Right.
And I felt like I had a big part of that Atlanta movement with being in the street and doing the parties. And really, I think the thing that made me number one faster in Baltimore, and people got to understand, it made me faster in Atlanta was I did this party called Northern Exposure. And Atlanta was full of people that were from up north. And all of the music was like Goody Mob and Outkast. You know what I mean? Like they would play some up north music, but it really wasn't like, I didn't find anybody that was playing like house music or club music or some of the real gutter underground up north tracks and stuff. And I really felt like people from up north were being like, they were moving there, but they were really so proud of New York. Like, remember, like when every time you go to a party, be like, "Is New York in the house?" Like New York was like that spot, right?
Right.
And so I did this Northern Exposure party, and I started on the air on November 4th. I did Northern Exposure, Martin Luther King birthday, the next year. So it was only like 2 months, 2.5 months since I've been on the air.
This was in 98?
Yeah, 90. So it would have been 99.
Right.
The first one was 99. And I remember that, I had gone to this, and I'm just going to say this. I had gone to this party, and I had some of my Baltimore guys with me. And we were just surveying the scene in Atlanta because I didn't know what was going on. And we went to this party at this club that was doing a live broadcast, but it was like the hippest place to be on Saturday. And I walked in the club, and the host, who was also on the radio, was in the front lounge in a booth with a bunch of chicks, and the party was in the back. But he was on the mic in a booth in the front, but the party was in the back room. And he wasn't even in the party, but he was like emceeing like he was in the party.
Wow.
And I was like, that's crazy.
Right.
And then we went into the party, and I remember going up the steps. There was another popular DJ at the time that was up the steps of this DJ booth. And I remember I went up there to introduce myself. And when I went to introduce myself, he quickly cut me off. He was like, "Yeah, nice meeting you, but you got to get out my booth." Like real, like cold and shit. And my guys was like, "He treated you like that? Like, does he know who you are?" And I was like, "I don't know." But I remember my guys was like saying, "You're going to kill in Atlanta." Because it's so non-personal. It's like the club scene was just already starting to be on that rah-rah VIP shit.
Right.
And it was a lot of ropes and VIPs. And I was like, nah, man, I want to go somewhere and I want to do a party that's like an open ballroom that's like 4 speaker stacks in a bar and a good-ass sound and lighting system. And I'm going to do Northern Exposure. The first night I went there was a line down the street with about 1,000 people in line. And the inside of the club held about 700 to 1,000 people. And it was already packed with 1,000 people inside by the time I got there at 10 o'clock. And there was already another 1,000 people outside. And Northern Exposure changed the face of Atlanta. And what we were doing, and really it helped me solidify being a DJ to the people of Atlanta. So it was Baltimore all over again. So every party I did was a sellout. Everywhere I went was crowded. Everything I did was like a hit. And I think it was the street helped my radio career, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. So you were on the radio on V103 in Atlanta from 98 to 2012, and you had your own morning show, right? It was the Frank and Wanda morning show, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So that was 1998 to 2012, and then also from 2017 to 2019. So just talk to me just a little bit about that long run in radio, because, again, you had this long run in Baltimore, and now you relocate to Atlanta, and you got another long run in radio. So clearly the radio loves Frank Ski. But also, before we go there, I remember for the first time I traveled to Atlanta, because I'm from the Midwest. First time I went to Atlanta, I believe I went to a club with a friend. I think it was called Kaya, I believe.
Yeah.
First time I ever seen you DJ.
That was Northern Exposure.
Man, let me tell you something. You tore the house down, first of all. I'd never seen, of course I knew Frank Ski's name because of the records, but I never saw you DJ. And I just, I need to salute you because you tore the house down. That's the first time I ever heard the song Nothing by Nori. And you ran it back at least 10 times. And it was just like, it was this whole scene that the party was amazing. And it was the first time I seen you DJ, and I thought it was incredible. So salute to you, because I've always thought that you were an incredible DJ. And I don't think you get, the credit of being a great DJ, because I think your radio career oversees that, if you may agree. Yeah. So with that being said, talk to me really quickly about this long-running radio with your own morning show in Atlanta.
Yeah, it was great, because when I came, I really had autonomy to pick my own people. So I was always impressed with Wanda. I had seen her at a comedy show before, and I was impressed with her. I thought she'd be great on the radio. I was able to bring my producer from Baltimore. I was able to bring my engineer, Danny Class, who made music and some historical DJ Class tracks in Baltimore. My partner, Bubby, I was able to bring him. I had met this comedian, Griff, who was also a great comedian and funny, and he was like a sports guru, and I was able to use Griff, and we put this show together. But I was able to do things that I wanted to do. So I knew that, like, I was big into traveling, and I remember, like, a lot of black folk were, like, scared of traveling. So I wanted to create travel experiences. So we took Atlanta around the world: Dubai, Hong Kong, Beijing, South Africa. I mean, you name it, we took them everywhere. I was able to do that. I was able to start my kids foundation, which is huge, and take these kids to the Amazon rainforest and the Galapagos Islands and stuff like that. And I was able to whatever I wanted to do. So I created the Youth Bowl, this youth football tournament that's real big down in this South region. And I was able to do much of what I wanted to do. And the growth was incredible, and the money was great. And I was making more money than I had ever made, and until the recession hit, and then things started changing in radio.
Wow. So you're saying you were making great money as a radio host with your own morning show in Atlanta on V103, right? So with the radio show, now again, we're talking 1998 to 2012. And then we're talking again 2017 to 2019. So while you had the Frank and Wanda morning show, you started your own foundation. So let's talk a little bit about the non-music things, right, that spawned from your radio career. You said you started a foundation called Frank Ski's Kids, right? Talk to me just a little bit about that.
Well, that was just really to, in Baltimore radio, you had to volunteer for organization and do nonprofit work. That was just part of who we were. We had to do one event a week. So when I got to Atlanta, they weren't doing that. But I remember that I still wanted to continue that and support the youth population. And I started with, like, the Youth Bowl. But I'm a big science freak, and I'm kind of like got that corny side. And I love nature. And I remember once I was I was fishing in Costa Rica with Mike Lubin, my lawyer, and he was fighting cancer. And I remember I wanted to go to the Galapagos Islands. And again, I always talk about how God works. I'm sitting at a table overlooking this lagoon in this cove in Costa Rica. And the owner of this lodge, this little fishing lodge, comes out and sits with us. And I began talking about that I had always dreamed I wanted to go to the Galapagos Islands, but I didn't know where to stay and whatever. And he was like, my best friend owns a lodge in the Galapagos. He said, when do you want to go? And Mike Lubin took out his credit card, and he said, this weekend, and gave the guy the card. And
wow.
I remember I got back to Atlanta, and I called my best friend I grew up with, Craig, and I said, dude, are you off next week? And he said, I can be. And I said, good. I said, in 2 days, meet me at the airport, bring some hiking gear, and meet me at the airport. And he met me at the airport, and I had a ticket for him, and we flew to Ecuador and went to the Galapagos Islands to study Darwin's theories. And I remember, like, seeing all of that. And when I went to the Darwin Research Station, I had asked them, like, how many student organizations came from the United States, and they said, we've never had a student organization come from the United States. And I said, well, I'm going to be the first to bring one. And that became my goal. And I went back and I raised enough money to take my first group of kids to study climate change in the Galapagos Islands. That really elevated the foundation to a different level. So we've done a lot of things. We've helped a lot of kids throughout the years. We've done art trips to Italy and science trips all around the world studying climate change and global warming. Taught about 30 kids how to scuba dive and study underwater. And
wow,
we've done all that. We went shark diving with 10 kids during Shark Week with Discovery Channel. So we've had some really big highlights, and raising money is just part of, I spiritually understand that there's a payback, right? Like when God gives it to you, he gives it to you to give away.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that that became part of my spirit to do that. Ironically, the biggest feature on my radio show since I've been in Baltimore, the biggest feature I've ever done was this thing I have called the Inspirational Vitamin, where I give like a spiritual message in the morning, about a minute and a half, and then I play a gospel song after it that kind of matches the message. And it is the number one feature on the whole radio station. It was number one at V103 in Baltimore. It was number one at 92Q, and it's number one on V103 for these past 20 years, that Inspirational Vitamin. So now I'm creating the book and the speaking series and a whole bunch of stuff out of that brand. And I think now it's, with radio, being the way it is, it's caused everybody to become more the better steward of using your brand, like outside of just the music side.
Right. It's forced most people to be more self-sufficient and create their own lanes, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's amazing. And, again, salute to you creating that, the Frank Ski Kids Foundation, which, of course, I'm assuming is still in effect to this day, right?
Yep.
And also, you have been awarded or honored, for a lot of things through your radio career. And just to name a few, like you've received Journalist of the Year from the Rainbow Push Coalition, Community Service Award from the NAACP, and many more accolades. How do you feel about that? Can you speak a little bit about some of these honors and these awards that you've earned through your radio career?
Yeah, it kind of like really, for me personally, kind of solidifies my efforts. When you're getting awards for doing stuff, sometimes it's like, sometimes you get awards to sell tickets, but when you get awards like that, it's really truly because all of those type of awards are from your peers. They're from people in the industry and people who live in the city. And when you get accolades like that, it really shows you that you're really in with the pulse of the city. My job, I tell people all the time, my job on the radio is not to play records because the records can play themselves, right? They can automate all that. My job is to talk to Atlanta and give them information primarily to make their lives better and to give them inspiration to make them feel better about themselves and help them live better, and then to make them laugh, on their way to work. And that's what we do every day. And if we're doing that, then, I'm okay with God. I'm doing God's work. And then I'm okay with understanding that I've done what I was supposed to do on air as well.
Absolutely. And this is what you do now currently with your new morning show, The Morning Culture, correct?
Right. Yep.
And is this, what station is this particular show on now?
Still V103.
Got you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still DJ to this
Yep.
day?
2 or 3 nights a week. And I've put out on my social media since New Year's. I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff I posted. I posted something New Year's, basically addressing the problems in the DJ culture. And it's caused a lot of controversy, but I don't care. And I said it on there. I can back up anything I say DJing. I'm not worried about that. And basically I've been really pushing to get back to that DJing in a strong way, because it's amazing that still to this day, there's always people who come to my parties and sit there and just stare at me all night because they've never seen me DJ, and they always look at me as this really serious guy on the radio, but they don't know at night, I really turn up on the turntables.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and that's what I was saying earlier. Most people know you when I say most people, I mean, from a national standpoint, they know you from being on the radio and or being a recording artist, putting out these, classic house records. A lot of people just haven't seen you DJ. I think it's incredible. I think you're an incredible DJ. And when people see you, they're going to be thoroughly impressed. So overall, how do you feel about the radio in 2020? How do you feel about the radio? Do you still have that same passion today as you did, in 88 when you got in it?
I would say yes. I still have the same passion. The problem is I don't think management and ownership has the same passion. So iHeart just went through where they fired 1,000 people.
Right.
And most of them were DJs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's kind of like really disheartening because what we do is a passion. And I think that if, could you imagine being a musician or an artist and you love drawing art, right? And then somebody says, well, you're fired. You can never do art again because I have a computer that can pick up a paintbrush and paint whatever we tell it to do, right? And then now you're struggling and can't work. And I think that has led to a sense in the radio industry that it's not fun anymore. It's not entertaining as much anymore. But these companies put themselves in that position. They're responsible for it. They over leveraged themselves. They bought too many radio stations and spent too much money on them. But I think it's going to level out where it's going to get back to more small owners, investing in the product and investing in people. So I still have fun in it, and I'm lucky to be one of those people that still has a certain amount of creative control and freedom. But even I'm answering to people for stuff now that I never had to answer to before.
I know that there's still money in radio, so I do believe that it's going to level out as well. And it always seems like it does, right? They clear house, they try to fix all their mistakes, and then they come back, rehire, restart over, and then it ends up, becoming somewhat similar to what it was before, right?
Yep, exactly. And you have a radio station that was making $20 million a year, right? I mean that's net, that's gross. After profits and everything, they're profiting a few $1 million a year, right? But they were sold at 7 times multiple. So they were sold at $140 million. But that same radio station that was making $20 million, back in 96 is now making $10 million because all the advertising is going to streaming and online and everything else, right? So now they're making even less money. They can't even pay the bill off of the note when they bought the radio station. So they only have a choice, and the choice is they gotta downsize, they gotta go bankrupt and start over again, and they got to sell a lot of their assets to pay off some of the debts. And I think it's going to be, right now, honestly, truly, if I had $1 million that I could leverage in a loan, I would be out here buying a radio station right now, but it's a buyer's market if people wanted to get in it, but you can't buy a radio station that's making $10 million a year and you can't buy it for $50 million, it's making $10 million a year, and that's what they making, and they trying to get out. Maybe it's a $15 million buy, you know what I'm saying? And not a $40 million buy. But I think it'll get back to that.
Yeah, I believe so too. I totally agree because, again, historically, there's always been money in radio. So I believe so too. So before we get out of here, I got a couple more questions. How do you feel about current club music or house music? I mean, you're one of the founders of this hip hop house, this club music, and you've put out a lot of hit records for house music. How do you feel about the current status of house music or club music?
I think that, let me preface by saying I don't get to go to house clubs as much to really understand the culture, but I'm still a big fan. So I have it programmed on all of my music sources to hear it. I still play a lot of the older stuff every day in my sets. But I will tell you that just like EDM music has reached its peak, and those DJs that were making $50 million a year are now not making that. And I forgot who was it that had a big residency in Vegas and bankrupt the club, and the club is closed now, right?
Wow.
And
right.
I think that just like I feel that EDM and that type of club music where you have like Diplo and Calvin Harris and all that, I think all that came from Black house music, right? And I think just like everything else that we create something and then we get tired of it and then somebody else takes it to the next level. That should have been our music, or at least we should have had ownership of it, but we did, right? So I think that now, even with house music for Black folk, they've been trying, they're so, it reminds me of Baltimore when I was there. It's so separate now. They want to be so separate in a way. They want to have their own thing, right? They're so anti-radio. They're so anti the establishment. They're so anti-masses that they make their music to be so organic for themselves that it doesn't allow other people to become fans anymore, right? So remember when house music got big, right? You remember when Madonna got into house music.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And Madonna took house music to the masses, to the white folk, right?
Right.
Cher took house music to the masses, to the white folk. But that was our music. And Madonna had always dated like dance DJs and shit from Jelly Bean and everybody else, right?
Right.
So, and they were all producers of Black music. So, Black and Latino music. And I think what happened is we kind of got out of whack with a lot of the house music. So much so that you know what the derivative of house music is now. And
What?
people can debate me all they want, but I'm gonna tell you what the derivative of where house music has gone, because I saw it coming. The derivative of house music is now Afro beats.
Right. Okay. I see that. Yes, sir.
You know, it's the tempo is slower, but that the house tempo was, set it off was 112 beats a minute.
Right.
Joanna or whatever is 107 beats per minute. It ain't that far off, bro. And they've just slowed it down, but the same rhythmic feel of what house music brought you is what a lot of these Afrobeat songs are bringing. But if you would have been in South Africa when the Olympics were there, when I was there, I heard it. I heard DJs like Black Coffee playing house music and slowing the shit down. And I was like, that's dope, right? So I did it. I took hip-hop beats and infused it into house music and created Baltimore Club. I saw that. What you listen to right now, here's the funny thing. You know that, like, trap music, right? Think about this for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What's the beat as a DJ? What's the beat tempo between trap music and Miami bass? What's the difference?
House music or that tempo is double time of what trap is. So trap.
But it's not double time. It just doesn't have the snare.
Okay, I got you.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the clap like the house, the Luke 2 Live crew and them fast danceable house records had the clap and the snare that was moving at 130 beats per minute. Trap music is at 60, 64, 65 beats, 70 beats per minute, and it just doesn't have the clap. I know, because I mix trap music with Luke shit every day.
Right.
Like, people are like, how did you go from Luke to trap music? I said, it's the same tempo.
It is. You're right.
It's the same tempo. So it's not that the music is different, and it's not that it's not there. It's and then the other piece of it is the chord. So in the house, in that fast music, the chord is a major key, right? So it makes it sound faster. But in trap music, it's minor key. So it makes it sound darker and slower.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that house music has a chance to come back. And there's some brilliant people doing it now, but I think it's our turn to bring it back. We can bring it back because what I've noticed, like I do the parties, and I don't care if I'm doing young parties or older parties. People want to dance. So when you go to the younger parties are playing they still playing Biggie. So when Biggie and all those songs that you mentioned, Nori and stuff like that, when those songs are played at these millennial parties, they're dancing. They're dancing to 20-year-old music.
You're right. Absolutely.
So
wow,
there it is.
Incredible. So what is the legendary Frank Ski working on right now?
Well, I'm going to do the compilation album. I'm going to do a acoustic lounge album for my kids' foundation after all of the countries we've been to. I'm doing the inspirational vitamin book. I just started I'm starting to tape it, a new video podcast series. And it's going to be these sit down interviews with people just like you did with me, where I'll sit down and get into people's, like you did a very thorough interview with me. Most people can't do it, but you did it. And, taking time and having people really tell their story. And that's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. So I look forward to all the projects and anything new coming from Frank Ski. You made a lot of classic records. What you did for house music is unparalleled, and for hip hop and house music. And those records are still played to this day. And you're still a radio legend. You're still on the radio. I mean, from you're talking 86. I mean, I know professionally 88, with the commercial radio, but 86, you said for college, I believe, all the way to now, and it's going to keep going. I mean, that's an incredible radio career. So,
thank you, bro.
So salute to you, Frank Ski, for being a legendary DJ, producer, house music artist, and an icon in radio. So how can our followers continue to follow Frank Ski?
Well, really, it's just my social media is all at Frank Ski. And so anybody can just reach me at Frank Ski on social media. I answer all of my DMs, and then they can follow me there to see what's going on with me. And that's really the best way.
Well, Frank Ski, I want to thank you for allowing me to interview you for Vinyl Esquire.
Thank you, bro.
Absolutely. So you're now listening to Vinyl Esquire, and this is the legendary DJ Frank Ski.
Hello world, I want to welcome you to Vinyl Esquire, the podcast